Hi and welcome back. Today I'm going to be painting a seascape inspired by this beautiful photograph by Alison Smith. I found it on Pixabay and it depicts a Scottish beach at Dumfries and Galloway, and I'll leave the link to the Pixabay photograph below. I'm going to be using a fairly limited palette for this. I'm going to be using Cobalt Blue, Davidson's Grey, Raw Sienna, Burnt Sienna and Burnt Umber. I'm using Davidson's pigments, but you can use any brand and any colours that you like really, your favourite blues and sort of nice muted beach scene colours. So the first thing to do is to simplify the photograph to just a few lines, and the lines that you want is your horizon line and then the line of the sea and the shore and then the little bit of scrubby grassland and the beach, and not much more than that. So I'm laying that out with my carpenter's pencil. It's just an ordinary pencil from a DIY store. It's got a nice chunky lead, so it means that I can get my sketch down without fiddling too much. It's the same as using larger brushes. If you paint with larger brushes, it keeps you loose. So sketching with a larger pencil can keep you loose too. I'm using Saunders Waterford cold press paper. It's taped to my board. My board's at an angle of about 45 degrees, and I've just put some masking tape across my horizon line below it too, because I'm going to protect my sea and paint that separately. And now I'm going to paint my sky, so I'm using my Escoda size 14 synthetic mop brush to sort of wet most of the sky area, but there are some dry patches, so hopefully that'll give me some nice variation in shades when I paint my sky in with my cobalt blue, and hopefully that'll mean I'll get some lovely soft and hard edges. So I'm running in the cobalt blue. I'm allowing it to hit the dry areas of the paper and the wet areas, and you can see that as it runs over the wet paper, it softly diffuses and runs down the board a bit because the board's at 45 degrees and creates harder edges where the paint meets dry paper. I can strengthen up my pigment in places so that I get a nice rich deeper hue of the cobalt blue near the top, and I can add a little bit more water and spread out the paint, dilute it a bit more across near the horizon line where I want it to be paler. I can leave areas of unpainted paper for my clouds, and also I can wash out my brush, squeeze out all the water and then use that to sort of scrub away some of the paint gently, and that will give me some sort of impressions of feathery light clouds too. You can see the water beading up across the masking tape on the horizon. I can just run a brush across that and mop it up. And now I'm going to leave it to dry. I won't fiddle with it because that will probably sort of make it look overworked. And as it is, I think it looks quite nice now. And now it's dry, I've removed the masking tape and you can see I've got that lovely clean horizon line. Now for starting to paint the windswept grasses and weeds across the foreground on the right. So I'm using my small Ron Ranson Pro Art Harkey brush with raw sienna, and then I'm going to dip into some burnt umber, maybe some burnt sienna, but mostly burnt umber and raw sienna to drag sort of diagonal brush strokes across this corner to loosely represent those windswept grasses, leaving plenty of gaps of unpainted paper as well, and letting the directionality of the brushstroke do the work to suggest the grasses for me. And here comes the burnt umber. and you can see it's softly running into the wet raw sienna. And again, I'm avoiding those unpainted areas because they add a bit of life and a bit of interest to the area. I can paint them in later if they sort of look as if they're a bit too stark. But for now, I'd rather keep them there and then see if I need them later on. And I'm happy with that for now, so I'm just going to leave it to dry. And as soon as it's dry, we can start to paint in the sandy beach and the shingle beach just in the lower left foreground. So now a watery mixture of the raw sienna and the Harky brush just to sweep in that little bit of sandy beach, leaving a few sort of gaps at the edge for the white of the paper to show through to give us the impression of the gently breaking waves. And now I've mixed up a much richer mix of most of my colours, and still using the Harky brush, I'm going to paint my beach, but this time I'm using the corners and the tips, but mostly the corners, to sort of dot and dash in some nice dark, rich, stony colours for the beach. I will then go in and create rocks and stones on the beach with the corner of a plastic card, or you could use a palette knife. So I want my mixture of paint to be nice and rich so that I can do this effectively. And then I want to bring some of these really dark areas into the grassy foreground. This is going to be the only place where I'm going to have these real strong darks in the shingle beach, but then I need that to lead up right up and sort of become integrated with the grassy shore. So I'm trying to create that sort of effect. And now this is the corner of my plastic store card. I'm scraping it through the rich paint across the top where I want to create a stone. Different sizes and shapes, but keeping them fairly small. And this is giving me some texture. I scrape across and it moves the paint out of the way and leaves me a nice dark line underneath the scraped area and around it. And also the paper is slightly stained underneath, so you get this lovely effect. This can take a bit of practice, so try it out in your sketchbook first, but it can create a really effective beach. A few more touches of dark in the foreground, and then now to that tiny bit of headland. Very carefully going to put that in with some of my Davidson's grey, or you can use Paynes Grey or your favourite dark, and keeping it nice and fine and sort of but fairly strong and straight on the horizon. And then using the tips of the flat brush, I'm just going to run a little bit of distant rocks and shingle across the beach, like in the photograph. No detail, just a suggestion of those sort of further beaches that are very far away in the distance. I'm now going to let everything just dry completely and then paint the last thing, which is the sea. And for the sea, I'm going to place a piece of masking tape across the top of my horizon. And this will help me to keep a nice straight sea. My sea mixture is cobalt blue, simply mixed with a touch of raw sienna to green it down a little bit and keep it nice and dark. And I'm using my flat brush and using horizontal brush strokes to bring a nice dark sweep of paint across the tape, and then leaving plenty of white unpainted horizontal streaks of paper to suggest all those beautiful breaking waves as they come into the shore. And then leave that to dry completely. You can use white gouache to create waves if you prefer, or if you lose the white of your paper, or you can lift out once it's dry with a clean damp brush. I'm now going to just add in a few more sort of slightly diagonal lines with the tips of my brush here and there in the foreground, just to sort of detail a few more grasses and things like that slightly more strongly, keeping them going in the same sort of direction as the rest of the grasses for that windswept, rugged beach look. And now time to just let that dry, and then I can carefully remove the masking tape from the horizon. If you find that your tape's a bit sticky and sticks to the paper too much, warm it up with a hairdryer first. That releases the tackiness so you can remove it more easily. Now I like that. There's a nice contrast of that darker, slightly greener water against the sea. So I'm just about finished now. I'm just going to use the very tips of my flat brush and run a bit of shadow underneath some of those wave crests. And the dark line of shadow will just throw those wave crests into sharper relief and make them show up a little bit better. So I'm going to stop now so that I don't risk overworking this loose painting. It's nice to keep it sort of as fresh and simple as possible. So I'm going to remove the tape and see how it looks with a clean white border. And I think it's okay. I'm pleased with most of it. I think I do need to just make a slight adjustment down here in the bottom left corner. So I've added a little bit more paint to that area, and I'm just going to scrape out with the card and add a bit more shingly texture. I found that area was a little bit plain. It just needed a tiny bit more sort of tonal value difference in order to make it work. And I think that works a little bit better now. So here's the finished painting. I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you found it helpful if you decide to try to paint a similar scene. Remember, the link to the photograph from Pixabay is in the description below. So thank you very much for watching. Please leave us a like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And thank you so much to my lovely Patreon group who support this channel. And I'll see you again soon, and happy painting. Bye.